So, welcome everybody. This is the General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group bi-weekly sync, and this is the December 27th of 2018. So we're 4 days away from New Year, which is mind-blowing. Time flies when you're having fun. Today is 27th of December. This is actually my birthday. So where else would I actually be than presenting this within this community call? Well, I was working today anyway, so why not actually take responsibility of the call as well, and rather than dividing that for somebody else. As expected, we have much less people attending than typically, which is completely understandable. Hopefully people are, if people are not working, they're prioritizing time with their family and other more important things, because it is a holiday season in the majority of, well, in certain areas of the world, let's put it this way. Anyway, so let's actually get started on the discussion. So quickly recap what this is all about. If you're first time arriving here, most likely, are there any first timers in the call? Just out of curiosity, are there anybody who are first time joining on the community call? Just out of curiosity. Yes, there always is. I knew that. So the special interest group call for general dev in PMP is basically meeting bi-weekly, and this is all about what is not everything else on SharePoint Dev, which is not about SharePoint Framework. So basically concentration on end-to-end solutions, provisioning, site provisioning, automation, APIs, flows, DevOps, Power Apps, and all of that stuff. So all of the non-client side stuff, so to say. We do have a separate special interest group call for SharePoint Framework, where we then concentrate bi-weekly on SharePoint Framework specific topics and JavaScript development. So depending again on your interest, you can choose to join both of them, or you can choose to join one of them, or then you can join on the monthly community call to see a monthly summary of what has happened within the SharePoint development. Now, the key point here is to go through, have a kind of an update on the general SharePoint development topics. We will always go through if there's any updates on the roadmap or any announcements from a SharePoint engineering side, and then we'll have always at least 1 or 2 demos scheduled, and then hopefully Q&A in the end. Now, let's actually get on going quickly on the opportunities of joining, on participating on the community. You can always volunteer for doing a live solution, a demo on the solution or a technical pattern within this call. Basically show something which might be useful for other people in the community, because we learn by seeing and actually having a discussion on those patterns. So today we have two demos coming up, one from Chris Kent, and one from Velin Georgiev after that. So Chris will first start around list view formatting samples and tips, and then Velin will talk about DevOps within the context of SharePoint Framework after that. The second option for participating always is contribute on GitHub, so being active on the GitHub, contribute on existing samples or new samples, and then provide feedback, so using SP DevDocs issue list as an example for giving us feedback if something is not working. You're highly disappointed on Microsoft, please tell us why. Why are you disappointed, and how we can help you so we're able to fix those things. And that's a really, really important thing. Don't be disappointed on Microsoft without us knowing why you're disappointed on Microsoft. So that is absolutely the right thing to do. Like already kind of said, if you have few slides on the general announcements, kind of a recap, a few slides which are always repeating, and then a few updates on the roadmap as well. So I have today's small adjustments on the roadmap slide. And then we have 2 demos. So Chris Kent is going to talk about list formatting tips and tricks. I do not know what is today's tips and trick. Hopefully Chris has something prepared, and I know he is having something prepared. And then after that, Velin is going to talk about setting up an Azure DevOps pipelines for SharePoint Framework solution. So kind of how to do that, and how to make sure that the SharePoint Framework solution is automatically deployed to the Office 365 tenant for people to start testing. Unless I'm completely mistaken on what Velin is actually going to show. I think that should be pretty accurate. That is kind of a SharePoint Framework topic, but on the other hand, these people who typically are responsible of DevOps are not those people who actually write the client-side web parts or SharePoint Framework solutions. So it's a slightly different perspective on the SharePoint Framework. Now, Let's actually get moving on the slides. So a few typical slides, and I do apologize that we always keep on having these slides in here, but there's a reason for it, because we always want to make sure that people find what's relevant for them. So the documentation and guidance, AKMS SP DevDocs, and this is the one consolidated platform for everything related on SharePoint development. MSDN redirections should be already in place, and I was testing them earlier today. So if you're looking into, for example, client-side API documentation or server-side API documentation, all of those are redirecting already to the docs.microsoft.com. So MSDN is going to be shut down, and that's quite a shocking news. So nobody would have thought that in 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but that's realities of life. The MSDN isn't flexible enough platform, so we need to shut it down so that we move to use the docs.microsoft.com platform where people can contribute, and that's a really big thing. Now, already in December, we can actually, the pump on the views is related on the MSDN shutdown, so we're already at 1.4 million views earlier today, based on the latest statistics. So quite a nice numbers. Most likely that view count, however, is dependent on the fact that we migrated something on the docs.microsoft.com, and there was an automatic view counts based on the automatic checks, but we'll get it aligned on the following months. The second thing, which is a really important thing to remember, and we keep on repeating this time after time after time. If you have an issue related on anything on SharePoint Dev, please go to AKMS SP Dev issue list and report that issue. We are working on an updated process again on this one, so making sure that you will see when your item is being processed and how is it being processed, and it's being tracked properly. We're still seeing some people reporting issues on Yammer or Microsoft TechNet, tech communities and all of that, and sure, you can have a discussion around the issue in Yammer or in Microsoft Tech community, but please always open up the issue in the SP DevDocs issue list so that it falls on the official supportability pipeline for SharePoint development. So if you're seeing anything strange within the SharePoint 2019 dev platform, webhooks has something strange or something else has something which doesn't seem right, please open the issue and then let's have a discussion somewhere else. Because when you open the issue, then it falls on the automatic process which we have behind of this SP DevDocs issue list, where our engineers will actually get the messages and it's getting triaged automatically. Now, related on to GitHub issues and related on GitHub, we're looking into doing some changes and structural changes in the GitHub. We talked about this one a few times in a community call, just a reminder on this one. But we're looking into actually moving all of the community sample repositories away from the SharePoint organization to PMP organization. And so this is github.com/PMP. It is controlled by the same people, so the PMP core team. So there is SharePoint engineering is present and plus our MVPs. But we're looking into making sure that, there's a lot of community samples which are slightly older, and not all of them are quite up to date, and some of them might have actually some issues. And we want to make a kind of a distinction between community samples and the officially used reference solutions, which Microsoft will guarantee that they will work on every single version. And this change is related on the transition. So as an example, SP DevDocs web parts and SPDevFX web parts and SPDevFX extensions will be moved over. The PMP repository will be moved over, and a few other open source initiatives will be moved over to the PMP organization. So mainly you can think that SP DevDocs will remain in the SharePoint organization, and a few other repositories. And this, like I said, this is really to kind of a distinct what is the work related on the open source and community, and what is the work officially supported 100% guaranteed by Microsoft, so that there's a distinction what's coming from where, because clearly there has been some confusion around this one, even though we're trying to be super clear on the messaging, but this will then help on the future on making sure what's where and how does it actually work. Technically, if you have cloned any of the existing repositories, so like SPDevFX web parts repository, it will work. Your clone will work without any impact on it when the move will happen, because GitHub is smart enough to do a redirections automatically. Now, When will this happen? We will start gradually moving repositories over, starting most likely next week, because this week is a super short week. Well, to be fair, next week is super short, well, slightly longer than this week, but a short week as well. But we'll start moving repositories over and making sure that everything is working properly. Like I said, it doesn't impact our existing clones, but it's just the main intention of this one is to clarify what's where and what's being supported, and well, what's being provided by Microsoft and what's being provided by the community, so making a clear distinction on that one. Hopefully that makes sense from a messaging perspective as well. And somebody, please tell me yes. Well, on the iron window, no. It says that the pull request will be automatically merged in the new location. That is true. So if you have anything pending, anything moved over, everything will work without any impact at all. So it will be completely seamless transition. Technically, we've done this once already when we moved the SharePoint relevant SharePoint repositories from the Office Dev to the SharePoint organization, and now we keep on moving them to the PMP organization. And like I said, it's just to clarify what's where and how things are moving. Cool. Let's move on things. So just a reminder, SharePoint Starter Kit 1.4 is out. So this one was updated to 1.7 version relatively recently. So if you're looking into having a end-to-end solution which is showing how to do multiple site collection provisioning, tenant templates provisioning, cool looking modern sites, have a look on SharePoint Starter Kit. We will keep on evolving this in the future as well. Right now it is in the SharePoint Framework 1.7 level, and it's already using the PMP tenant templates. So basically it's provisioning site designs and site structure, scripts, and all of the tenant level solutions using the PMP PowerShell. It isn't fully open source, available for you for download, or you can install that to your tenant or a dev tenant and then have a ready to use a nice modern portal for your consumption. Good. Few kind of a quick update on the SharePoint developer roadmap. So we talked about this one already last week in the community call as well. So the SharePoint Framework 1.8 is the next kind of a big release for SharePoint Dev, really the core platform level release. And this is planned to get released on the first quarter of 2019. I don't want to give you an exact date, what we're currently planning, because then you might actually, what if we delay and you have something locked on that date and then we delay for a few weeks. But by end of the first quarter 2019 is relatively safe to say. And this one will have a general availability of Microsoft Teams development with SharePoint Framework, general availability of single part app pages, GA for isolated web parts, and then also GA for provider hosted solution in SharePoint. So basically AKMS Teams applications hosted in SharePoint. It will also have some authentication improvements. Right now we have challenges related on ADL.js with rich and mobile clients. So if you're using, for example, the SharePoint mobile client, it has some challenges related on graph access and graph API approvals, and all of those are planned to get fixed in the 1.7. And then we're looking into updating the TypeScript version to a newer version, whatever is the right suitable version at the time. Well, we need to lock down the versions relatively fast because the first quarter is in a few months, so closing in a few months, so relatively fast we need to lock down these things. Other topics bubbling under: store and app source story for SharePoint Framework, still under development, well, under planning right now. We're getting pretty close on locking down the plan on that one, which is good. So that means that you could actually provide SharePoint Framework solutions through SharePoint Ad Store, or first using the app source. SharePoint Framework library package support for third party, and then looking into having Office client add-ins built using SharePoint Framework at some point. All of that is under development. The final thing, updated thing here, which I added here, is that updated REST, CSAM, and server-side API documentation process is under development right now. So do the transition from the MSD and the docs.microsoft.com, we can actually start looking into getting community contributions on top of the existing API documentation. And this is something what we will have a meeting with the docs people early January, so we can hopefully figure out the right process so that we are able to auto-generate some of this stuff, and then community can still contribute for the samples in the official documentation, which would be the optimal situation. More details on that one later. Good. 50 minutes, not too bad, because the next item on the agenda is Chris Kent, calling from the future, right? Or back from future or something. I don't know.
Something like that. Sounds good. Share this screen here, and you guys let me know when you see it.
Yep.
That's right, Matt Damon. Yeah, don't forget it. Sure.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
All right.
Loading. Oh, Ralph got the Matt Damon reference. There we go. So.
All right. Here you go. You guys got it?
Yep, we got it. Take it away.
All right. Woo! Okay. So, Chris Kent, there's my Twitter, there's my blog. I'm an Office Development MVP and a member of the core team. Very exciting. I have several list formatting tips all rolled up together today as a special late Christmas present or birthday present for Vesta. That sounds great. Sure, whatever, it's a present. Sounds good. All right, let's take a look. So what if I got this birthday list here? All right. We see that my birthday was yesterday, and I had a Hello Kitty themed party because I actually share a birthday with my daughter. It's very exciting. We've got Vesta's birthday, right? That's today. He's working anyway. And then Stefan Bauer doesn't have a birthday because he's actually immortal. All right, but what if I wanted to change this up? I wanted to apply some themes to this, right? Make it look a little better. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to do some cool stuff with this using some exciting theme colors, right? So if I want to match those theme colors, I mean, I can always come in here and I can format this view, right? And I come over here and I've got something. All right, so I'm going to do what's called a view format, right? So I'm going to apply that to the view itself, right? So I apply my schema here, and I'm going to add an additional row class, right? And it's pretty simple here. If I want to apply one here, I could say MS BG color, and this is where I get to pick a color. So if we take a look over here on this UI Fabric color site, right, this is how you build these things. So you're going to put font color, BG color, border color, hyphen, then whatever the color name you want. All right, where do you get those color names? That's what's down here. So these are all the theme colors. And then you'll notice neutral colors here. Let's back that out. Neutral colors are actually technically theme colors as well, which is a little weird. Black and white are actually theme colors and will adjust based on your theme. So down here, though, are more fixed colors. So you can see these actually have a hex code for those colors down there. So we're going to take a look at all these and how you can apply all these fantastic things to make sure that your formats always match your theme and always look good and match everything else. So we're going to grab that MSBG color. All right, we're going to just say MSBG color dash theme primary. All right, close that. Let's add our close squiggly. Preview that. Wow. All right, you'll notice the first thing is that text suddenly becomes unreadable. All right, so we can add an MS dash font color dash white. All right, we're going to preview that. Looks a lot better. If we save that, and we take a look now, if we go and change the look on the site, all right, so if we were to pick one of the dark ones, this is what I mean by that. You'll notice now the text is, technically it's black now, even though we said white, right? That's why those neutrals are actually theme-based, and that is super ugly, so I'm going to cancel that. All right, we can go a little further than that, right? So if we come in here and we format that current view, right, and maybe we want to do something where we add a hover style, right? So now we can add another, so we add a space for an additional class, right? So BG color dash theme primary darker, sounds good. And then we say dash dash hover, so we only want to apply that on a hover. So preview that, and let's see what I type in. Oh, theme, not primary darker, theme darker, sorry. Theme darker, I'm going to preview that, maybe. Well, you get the idea, it would work. Oh, well, look at this. Got to do MS-BG color. Got it? All right, preview that. There we go. So you can see now we get some nice stuff going here, and as you start to do this as you go, you can make some really nice-looking things that change styles as you go through it. Now, if you want to start start to do things where we start to do conditional, right? So if I wanted to say, hey, only mark the ones where there is no birthday applied, right? So that's where I can start to add some nice formatting. So I say it equals if, and I'm going to say, now if I want to check that birthday, right, is empty, right, I'm going to say toString. I'm going to reference that birthday column, birthday, right, equals empty string. Use the single quotes inside there. Then I want you to apply these styles. Now, because I'm now building these, I need to actually wrap those in single quotes themselves. Otherwise, don't apply anything. All right. So now, if we say preview that, let's see, what did I do? $sign birthday toString. I did not put the in parentheses here. There we go. All right, so now only Stephen Bowers is highlighted, right, with those kind of things. So you can see you can go a little crazy with this. You can get all sorts of cool stuff going. So that's the first one. All right, so that's your first tip on doing styles here. We're going to see that a little more elaborate in a way that makes a little more sense. So if we come over here, what if I've got something where now I've got a list here. It's fruit. I've got apples and oranges. These are actually technically content types, right? I've got an apple content type. I've got an orange content type. Now I want to apply formatting based on that content type. All right, so I can do something very similar right here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to format the current view. All right, and I'm going to let's grab that schema. All right, let's paste that over here. So I've got my schema. Then I'm going to say an additional row class. All right, so very similar here. But instead this time, I'm going to do something based on the content type. So now I'm going to say, I'm going to reference the content type, which is a little strange. And we're going to talk about some of the quirks with this. So if I say $sign content type, you'll notice that this is not a part of the view. So things like ID, content type ID are available regardless of what your view fields are, which is unusual most of the time in view formatting or column formatting. To reference another column, it needs to be a part of the specific view you're on. All right, so if I'm going to say if content type, and this is just the internal name, equals Apple, all right, let's do ms-bg color-red dark. That's a beautiful color, right? Otherwise, since it's orange is the opposite, we're going to say ms-bg color. We're going to say orange lighter. Now keep in mind these are case sensitive, so let's do that. And then because I also want to do that same thing where I want that text to look correct, I'm going to do string concatenation right here in this formula. So I'm going to say plus, put a space, ms, font color dash white. All right, let's close that guy, put it in squiggly. Let's preview that. And we didn't do it. So that's when we just cut and paste the one I already did. Hey, look at that, it worked. Magic. All right. So we see here, so yeah, someone's asking here, can you do else if? Right, so the first part, so the if, you'll see in these parentheses here. So this is the condition, right? If this is true, do the first item here, right? So I've got the first item here, then you're going to put a comma. This is the else. All right, so if you wanted to do an if else, all you would do is nest another if statement right here where I've got my else. Right, so you can have infinite number of nested if statements here. I don't recommend you go infinite. But you can certainly go several levels deep. That's exactly how you would create a switch statement, right? So if you wanted to switch based off of a status column and you wanted to apply like maybe 4 different styles based on that, you would just nest those if statements right there in the else parameter. Got it? Very exciting. So that's beautiful. We've got, our content type is now determining the color we apply. Now, if we wanted to do something maybe a little more elaborate, that's where we've got a nice sample for you. So if we come over here to our sample repo, that's in SharePoint currently, it's an spdev list formatting, right? So we'll paste that link for you, right, in the chat. There you go. All right. Woo. Now, if we take a look here, we've got a view sample called content type format, which will illustrate some of these things. Real quick before I do that, let's switch back over here and show you a couple do's and don'ts. So when you reference a content type in list formatting, you can always reference the content type ID, or you can reference the content type. So the content type ID is going to be a GUID. There's no squigglies or anything. It's just the number with the hyphens. It's always available regardless of what you do, but it is the list content type ID. So it's not your site content type ID, which generally you're not going to care that much, but it's a bit of a pain. And if you ever try and apply this format to any other list, right, even when you've got that same content type on your site collection, it's not going to work. You're going to have to change that ID. So that's why it gets a thumbs down. Do not recommend. So the content type is just the internal name, so it's the text, and it's almost always available. So there's a weird little bug right now that when you add content type to your view, if you do that, it will not apply correctly. So content type no longer becomes available for you as a reference. So that's a weird quirk. It's the only one that really works that way right now. But just keep in mind, don't add it to your view. If you're going to apply a format anyway, there's really very little reason to add that to your view because you can reference that value regardless. Just to show you what I mean on that, if we take a look. So I've got this one here. If I go to Simple Rows Failure, right, you can see where I've got the content type here. You can see it's not detecting anything. It's just doing that else condition, right? And if I go to Show Hide Columns, right, I take that out. Well, then there we go. So that's just kind of a weird quirk. Just don't add it if you don't want to use it. Got it? All right. So now let's take a look at something that's a little more elaborate. So if we come in here to this content type format, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to grab this thing, the whole thing. I don't have to download anything. I just go to our repo. I'm just going to select the whole thing. I'm going to right click. I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to come over here. And we're going to see a couple of things. Let's switch back to Simple Rows. All right, let's format that current view. I'm going to paste that thing in here. Boom. Preview that. Nice. Beautiful. So we're going to show you a couple of different things inside this format that are worth taking a look at. The first one is how we're referencing these images. All right, so how are these images getting referenced? So you can certainly upload these. These images are just in the documents library in a folder called Fruit. All right, so I've got Fruit here, and there they all are. And so we're referencing them. If you take a look at the sample itself, let's see the image right here. All right, so we're just building it, shared documents Fruit, and we're putting in the type. So we're checking the content type, and we're depending on that, which column we want to pull that value from, right? So it's a little convoluted, but the main thing I want to point you to is this. This is a relative link. So there's some disadvantages and advantages to doing this. One advantage is then I can move this around from site to site if I'm relatively certain where I'm showing this format, and it's not a problem. I don't have to put in the full URL to the site. Otherwise, right, I've got to put in my tenant. I'm going to put that full URL, right, because I've got the sites. I can't just put a slash. So the format then becomes very specific to a site. So by putting the ... right, I'm doing a relative reference to those images. So that can be really nice when I want to apply this to multiple sites or I want to move this thing around, which we'll take a look at in a minute. But again, if you're doing things where you're going to put it on pages and those pages are nested within folders, then that's going to be causing a problem if you're using this within the web part. So just something to keep in mind. It's one of your options to get away from that hard coding of your full-on site URL. Got it? All right, woo! So now the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to, right? So if you'll notice here, we've got these things that are in different sizes, and as I resize this window, all right, well, you can see when I format the view, right? Things shift around, they move around. We've got a couple of things like that. So there's another really great one where you can see there's some nice tile format in the sample repo. You can take a look at that. But how is that accomplished? So that's accomplished just right here up at the top in our main element. So we've got our row formatter and our main element type. We've got this style, and all we're doing is this float left. Now, there's a couple of caveats with that. The nice thing is it makes these things completely independent. If you're going to do that, highly recommend you hide the column header, hide the selection, because those get extra confusing when you're doing that. One caveat is we're finding that there is currently a bug with the paging. So if you've got a large amount of items in your list or your view, don't do the float left because there's some issues there where it's trying to retrieve that kind of infinite scroll in that paging. I expect that to be resolved, but for now, just be aware of that when you use the float left. But it's a really powerful way to create a really dynamic visualization, right, that doesn't look at all like a standard list view, right? So now let's move on to the next little tip here. So the next tip is that you guys may or may not be aware that column formatting and view formatting is fully supported by P&P remote provisioning. So you're able to take these things. So if you're doing the kind of stuff that we talked about here, where you're putting the relative links, right, you're not using the content type ID, which is that list content type, you can grab this whole thing, right, and you can move it from site to site. So generally, if you're moving a format, you can just come in here, you can select all, and you can copy that, and you can paste it to other sites. But what happens when you've got baggage such as, specific view you want to apply, or you've got lists with specific columns, or in this case, content types and site columns, and all that together. Well, the perfect way to kind of solutionize this whole thing is PnP remote provisioning. All right, we can see that here. So if I come over here, I'm going to create a new site. All right, and we'll click the communication site. Sure. Create a fruit site. Let's see if I have a fruit site already. I don't. All right, perfect. So we're going to finish that. We're going to apply that. So I've gone ahead and I've extracted a template, right? We're not going to go into details of that. We've gone over that a number of times, and I have a link for you if you want to research some of that. But it's really just a simple PowerShell command. You're going to pull that out, so I'm going to do that on my current one. And then all I've done is I've gone and I've edited it slightly. So you can actually see this in the repo for that sample. Got this fruit template XML file. So this is just remote provisioning here. All right, you can see our exciting site columns coming on over here. Right, and our content types are coming. And then we have our list instance where we have those content types. Now I did two minor things to this, right? Well, I made it where it's going to remove the default item content type. That's a simple manual edit. You can see here, though, this is where our custom formatter for the view is actually being applied. So the whole view format is right here, right in line. Pretty easy to do. And then the other thing here is I added this files here, which is just going to make sure that our images get added, right? So it's just copying one directory to another, right? So it's copying the local directory.
It, by the way, always looks so beautiful when you're mix and matching XML and JSON, but that's...
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah,
it's
yes,
great.
It does.
Yeah, you get these. At least this one, it doesn't look so bad. Sometimes when you see some of those site designs, some other stuff, it gets a little crazy.
Yeah.
The nice thing, though, is like I didn't write this. Right, this was generated for me by the remote provisioning engine. All I did was run a command that said get PnP, provisioning template.
Yep.
That's all I ran and saved it to the XML file. I came in and I added this little thing down here. This is normally not necessary, but I have those images. So generally, you don't even need to manually edit these things. It's all magic as far as we're all concerned, right? Okay, so now I've got my fruit site, right? I don't have anything on it. Very sad, empty site. But if I come down here, right, so I'm in here, so what do we call fruit? I'm going to connect PnP online. I'm just going to connect there. Apply for PnP provisioning template. I'm going to give it the path, which in this case is, what is that? Let's see, I've got to save. Fruit template.xml, right? So that's all I'm going to do. So I'm going to run that guy. And all this is doing a differential against this site versus what I've got in my template there, my PnP provisioning template, and it's applying my content types, it's applying my site columns, it's applying the list, it's adding those content types to that list instance, and it's applying that view format, and it's uploading those individual image files, which you can see right now. So it's putting all of that, and because I use those relative image links, right, and I use the content type internal name, you can ignore that error, that's because I haven't updated my provisioning template. All right. My PnP PowerShell. All right, so if I come back, though, to the site, all right, so now I've got my fruit site. I'm going to just refresh here. I should have a fruit list. There it is. All right. And I don't have anything in it, but if I add, a couple of, let's add a new apple. All right, so I add an apple, Red Delicious, Wowee. All right, I save that. You can see, now I have a format that's all applied on my brand new site, so you could easily wrap some of this stuff up, throw it in, alongside with some of your site designs or site scripts, and create a really powerful way to take your formats and make them a little more generic, that apply with the themes and apply with those colors. It can be applied all across everything. Okay, so that's several tips all in one, and here's your resources on that. So if you want to find out more about those styles, the specific way you had to format those class names, you're going to go to the UI Fabric site, and you're going to go to the colors. There's also several things where you can do with fonts. So if you want to take a look at the fonts, you want to apply different font weights or font styles, there's some pre-configured pieces there. Want to check out our samples? There's a ton of samples. A lot of them are using the specific theme classes. So you're going to see examples of that. You're also going to be able to see this content type format. And again, it's not a very pretty format, but the whole idea is just to see how you're applying those content types. One caveat to note there is there's not, a branching where I say, hey, if it's this content type, apply this format, or if it's this content type, apply this format. You're going to be checking if it's this content type for each individual attribute. So take a look at that. It's just a different way to think about it, but it's one it's helpful to take a look at and really kind of familiarize yourself with that. But you can do a lot of really cool things to create some really dynamic views when you're mixing in those content types. And then if you're interested in what we just showed at the end there, it's a little more advanced, the PNP provisioning, check that out. There's a ton of stuff with that. And here's a blog post that kind of goes over the details of using theme colors and the UI fabric styles within your list formatting. All right, any questions? I'll be here in the chat, but that's the main thing I got here. All right, cool. Woo!
Awesome, thanks, Chris. There was one question from Kiran before we move on to the Velin, which was around, can we do date calculation on column formatting? So could I do something like today plus 5 days and then color up?
Oh, absolutely. So let's see, we have a format that'll do that for you. So we've got a few of those.
I just stole the presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
That was my bad.
So if you take a look through the SBDiv list formatting repo, we've got a couple of those. There's one that's a date conditional format that's checking against that at now. So there's a magic string called at now that is the current date and time. So it's a little weird when you take a look at some of that in terms of midnight, right? So if you're not doing it, your date is actually the date at midnight, so 00. But you can easily convert that. So what you do to do that is when you convert that, you're going to use this number function. If you want to add to the date, use number, put your date inside that function, and that's going to give you the milliseconds since whatever, something 1970, and then you're just going to add those days times 24 times 60 minutes, times 60 seconds times 1,000. And again, we have examples of that, but you can totally do date calculations, so you can actually display different dates, or you can use that to calculate, hey, am I within a 5-day range of a specific date, all that kind of stuff. So, and if you've got more specific questions about that, I can point you to the exact samples of that if you just reach out to me on Twitter or wherever else. Okay?
And just a final note on that one before we get Velin, the next presentation. So column formatting and view formatting, they're super valuable, super, let's say, flexible. There's two, let's say, how would I put it? There's kind of two considerations which people should be aware of. One is if you're planning to execute any code, any JavaScript code, that is not possible because that would be a security threat and that would basically enable script injection within a site. So you can only use supported functions and behaviors which the column formatting and view formatting is supporting. And the second thing what was the second thing? Is the one that if you are provisioning these things from a centrally by an administrator, you need to remember that the end user, as long as the end user has a management permissions on a list, they can go and remove that. So if you want to have a full 100% ownership on making sure that nobody can't actually modify the experience, then you would have to use SharePoint framework, because then basically there's no way for getting rid of or changing the rendering format. Did it make sense, Chris?
Yeah.
Can you translate that in English, please, from Finglish to English? No.
Right. So list format is extremely valuable, extremely powerful, right? There aren't really any need to do full-on solutions. I've shown you a way to do some remote provisioning to kind of bundle things up. But it's really powerful, but you only need designer level permission. So if you've got something come from an admin level where you're like, this column should always display this, an end user shouldn't have the option to change that, that's when you're going to use a field customizer with SharePoint Framework. Or if you need to do something a little more elaborate with JavaScript, or really anything that view formatting doesn't do. You can do a lot with it, but there are definite limitations. That's when a field customizer is really going to be helpful for you.
Yep. Right. Thank you. Cool. I think it's time for Velin to let Velin go. So Velin, we can see your screen. That's all good.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. And Velin, just take it away.
Yep. So, hello guys, my name is Velin Georgiev and I'm a SharePoint developer for a very long time. If you see if you hear a background noises, these are my kids singing Happy Birthday Vesa downstairs, so don't freak out. Now today we're going to talk about automated pipelines. So the demo that I'll try to show is building from scratch. Raja is trying to take control. I'll just reject again. So what we will do is we have a SharePoint framework solution, and our source code is in a GitHub repository, and we'll link that GitHub repository with Azure pipelines, and then we will bundle and package the solution here in an automated way once you submit a new piece of code into your repository. And then once we've built the new packages, we will use simple scripting using the PnP Office 365 CLI 2 to deploy that to our tenant, to deploy the changes we've made on the solution here. So I already have my tenant prepared, and this is the tenant app catalog, and my package is already been deployed there, and the web part within that package is already being installed on a site within that tenant, and it shows version 20. At the end, version 12, at the end we'll have version 13 here, hopefully, if we can set up everything within the time frames. So let's assume that I just manually published that version here, and now I want to create an automated pipeline that everything is fully automated end-to-end, so I don't have to manually drag and drop here again. So here is my GitHub repository, and I had to upload my solution there to save some time, and it's called Pipe 1, and it has nothing to do with Azure pipelines. It's not automated. It's just a bunch of code in a GitHub repository, and we'll start from here. So the first thing to do is to install the Azure pipelines here, and I'll go to the marketplace to show you where that's located. So if you go to the marketplace and if you go to deployment apps, you'll find Azure pipelines there. So you can click that one and you can simply install it. So if you haven't done that before, you get an install button here, but because I've already installed the free tier, I already have different buttons here, but it's the free tier and it's good enough for all your experiments, so you can experiment right after the demo. What I'll do is I'll configure that to work with my repository. So I'll go here and I'll say configure, and you have some details here, but at the bottom you can say, okay, configure Azure pipelines with all my repositories, or just select some of the repositories here, and that's my preference here. So I'll just add my new repository there. So that repository is not part of the list here, and you can see all my previous tests, but I'll just select that one and add it there. Once I save that, it will try to redirect me to the Azure DevOps. And with Azure DevOps, you need an account. So you have to create an account with Azure DevOps. You have to log in with that account. Then you go through a wizard, nice wizard, that will link a GitHub with Azure DevOps. So I have to select my organization here, and this is the correct one. And I'll create a new project there, and I'll call it Pipe 1, exactly as my repo is in GitHub. Then I'll be navigated to another window, where, as you can see, it's more like a wizard experience here. You're clicking and you're navigating, and that thing will open Azure DevOps with my new project. So now I'm in Azure DevOps, and this is my new project here. And I'll have to select my GitHub repo, and this is the correct one. Then it will try to go. Now we already linked GitHub here, and it will try to go into my GitHub repo and identify what piece of code I have there, and it will try to recommend me a configuration. As you can see, it's smart enough and figured out that this is a Node.js, or it has something to do with Node.js, and I can use it, or I can select from a different templates here, even here. So for me, Node.js is good enough. I'll just pick it up. And then it will generate a YAML file. So the YAML file is my build. So we'll have two pipelines. First pipeline will build our package, our SPPKG package. And the second pipeline will release that package to the tenant. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm using that YAML file to create my first pipeline, which will be the build pipeline. And as you can see, there is like a YAML, and there is a markup here, and we can easily recognize the trigger master. That means that whenever I push a new code to the master branch, it will trigger that build, and it will try to create a new build for me. Then the pull is what type of virtual machine I'll be using to build the package, and this will be Ubuntu in my case, but you can use Mac or Windows here, but I'll stick to the defaults here that are recommended by them. Then the next one will be, once we get the virtual machine to do the compute for us, it will install Node.js. So that will install Node.js 8. And after that, it will run a script that will say npm install. npm install is nice for us, but we don't need npm build because the SharePoint framework is using gulp. So I have to add an extra step here, and I have to say there is another script that I don't need the build here. Instead, I can say test, because I have unit tests, and the JES testing framework will run the unit tests, and if they fail, they'll fail the build, so I can replace it with test here. But after that, I have to do go clean, go bundle ship, and go package solution ship. So this will create the sppkg file there. So that's my next step. But I'm not done yet. I have to do 2 extra steps to complete the whole flow here. So I have to do another task here. And this is all documented within the document. So you can go on that URL there, and you can see how to build those steps here, and the markup and what that means. But basically, the last step for me is this is a virtual machine. So that virtual machine, they'll spin up a virtual machine for me. They'll build the package, but that package is on the virtual machine. And once the build is done, the virtual machine will be closed or deleted or whatever, and my package will be gone. So there should be a way for me to store it in Azure DevOps, and this is the last step here. What I'm saying is, get it from the virtual machine and store it in Azure DevOps. So that will be stored in a folder called SPFS SPPKG, and I can just store it here and use it with my release pipeline or whatever I want to release out of that build. But I need another extra step here, and I'll just paste it here, and I'll have another artifact out of that. So this will be my package here, and this will be my release scripts. So basically, I'll create 2 folders stored in Azure DevOps. One will hold the SPPKG, and another will hold the release script. And I'll show you the release script in a moment. But this is basically a bash file that will connect to the tenant whenever I start building the release pipeline, and it will grab the package from Azure DevOps and it will upload it to the tenant. But I'll put it for now here, and this is my build, and as you can see, these are all the steps, and I'll just save and run. Okay. So that will that will save the YAML file directly in the source control. So that can be used everywhere. It immediately goes back to GitHub, saves the YAML file, and it starts the process. So it will try to find the unavailable Ubuntu agent, and it will try to run all these tasks that you saw from the YAML file. So it's initializing the job, and then it will try to install Node.js here, and then it will try to do npm install, and that might take a while. And while this is running, I'll just show you the deployment script here. So as you can see, the source code, if I refresh, you'll see a YAML file here. And this is exactly what we've built previously. There is the YAML file. Now, I have an extra piece of script, which is a bash script, and it's using the CLI that we will run when we have the build and when we have all the artifacts built. And this is how it looks, but I'll use that script in a moment. It's just for you while we're waiting npm install. It accepts 2 parameters here. Then once we get those 3 parameters, it will try to install the Office 365 CLI. It will output the version. Then it will try to connect to my tenant using the credentials. Then it will try to add the package to the tenant catalog, to the tenant app catalog. Then it will try to deploy it with a skip feature deployment. That means that the new package will be available for all the sites within the tenant. It's a very simple script, and we will use it when we build the release pipeline. So let's see what is happening here. It's almost done with npm install. Then it will try to run the tests, because I have tests within my SPFX solution, and it runs jest, and it will try to spin up. It will try to run just after this is done, and it will try to execute the tests. So the test execution will start here, and it's always good to have unit tests when you have an automated pipeline, because in a case of a test failure, you can just fail the build and ask whoever is responsible to fix the solution. So the npm install and test is done, and that was very quick, but I can show you that all the test suites are run here, and I had 20 tests and they all passed, just for your information. And then build and package is done, and then it's creating the artifacts. So after it's done with the artifacts, we'll get a nice blue button here that says the artifacts are ready, and these are basically 2 folders with files. The first one is the script that I'll be using in the release pipelines, and the second one is the package itself. So they're saved in Azure DevOps, and I'll use them in the next step. So this is the build pipeline. It's done. It was successful. Now we have to create a release pipeline that will actually deploy the package that's been built. So I'll add a new pipeline here. And unfortunately, we still don't have that YAML experience for release pipelines, but I hope that soon will be there. So I'll say empty job, and I'll say that's my dev environment here. So this is the place where you select your artifacts, and I know that my artifacts are stored in Azure DevOps. So I'll just try to find those artifacts here. As you can see, you can pick up artifacts from different providers here, even from Jenkins, but mine are stored here, and they're stored in pipe 1. And then that's important, that's alias that you set up, and because my PMP Office 365 CLI script uses that alias, I'll just replace it there. But this is your alias. This is basically the folder where your package is. Okay, and then once we have the artifacts here, we can click on that button and enable continuous deployment. That means that with every build, it will deploy to our dev tenant, if we have a dev tenant or dev environment. I have to do another additional thing. I have to enable that here as well. So once those 2 are enabled, whenever new build is done, it will automatically deploy the package. So no user intervention. But we have to do a little bit more here. So I've clicked to tasks here, and I have to set up how exactly that will be deployed. So I'll be using Ubuntu machines again, because I'm using the CLI, and I can use whatever I want here. But then I'll add one extra step. So it will find a release agent for me, which is Ubuntu, and it has to install Node again, because the CLI is using Node. So I'll install Node here, and another extra step is after Node is installed, we'll run a bash script. And that bash script is part of our artifacts that we've just built. So I can click on that thing here, and I can find my artifacts. As you can see, the package is here. The script that I'm going to execute is here. So I'll just select the script here. Then that script requires 3 parameters. So I have to set up the 3 parameters there. And the way to do that is you pass arguments here, and those will be taken from, you can hardcode them here, but obviously I cannot hardcode password here. So you have a place where you store variables, and I'll take them from there, and I'll create those 3 variables there to see just how it works. So I'll create the first variable, that is site, and I'll paste my site there. I'll create another variable called email. Paste my email there, and I'll create a third variable that is a password, and I'll make it a password field so you don't see my pass. And we should be good enough to run that thing. So I'll save it, and then we have our pipeline ready. Now the only thing is to just test it. So I'll have to just make a change in my code. And what I will do is I'll just change the title here from 12 to 30. And I'll say git commit title changed. Then I have to pull from the repository because Azure DevOps modified my repository, so I have to say git pull rebase. That should be good. And then I have to push it to the repository. So once I push it, that will go to the master branch. That's saved. That will go to the master branch, and I'll show you what is the experience here. Like I have 3 commits here, and the 3rd commit is in progress. As you can see, the previous build was a success. Now I have another build that is running, and if you click on that dot here, you can get more details. So you can go here, and it still says in progress, but you can go directly in Azure Pipeline. So I can open that, and I'll be navigated to Azure Pipelines here. And you can see my build running at the moment. Again, npm install, all these steps will be repeated again. And you can see if I click on my builds, you see that that's my 2nd build because I didn't change. My 1st build was okay. So that indicates that it's still running. After this is done, it will trigger the release pipeline, and we'll see a list of a release pipeline. But while this is running, I'll show you something else. So on the release, it's very quickly I'll edit that release, and I'll show you that you can have your dev environment here, but you can clone that one and you can create a QA environment, for example. And for your QA environment, it's good to have a QA approver, so it doesn't immediately go there, but instead you can say pre-deployment approval, and you can assign a QA lead or someone to pull the code in QA when the QAs are ready to accept that code. Something else is you can clone again, and you can have a dev environment, production environment, sorry. So the same thing with the production environment, you can set it up. For example, that could be a release manager approver or something, so it's not automated there. It will be only automated when it goes from build to dev, and your dev environment will be always up to date. But then you have approvers here, and that works very good. And let's see what is happening with the build. It's still running. Okay, I have 2 more minutes. Hopefully, we'll be able to see the change.
I think we can go slightly longer than that if needed. So if somebody needs to drop, they can see the recording afterwards. But we probably want to see this in practice. Absolutely.
Good. What's happening? It's still running. Okay, almost there. I'll make it. I'm pretty sure. So here is my catalog, and I deployed an hour ago. After all these pipelines, automated pipelines, that will refresh, and my web part will hopefully refresh to version 13. If I change that, yeah, I've changed that. So let's see how it goes.
And while that's doing that, so let me also clarify the fact that since we're talking about SharePoint Framework web parts, and that SharePoint Framework web part is, even though it wouldn't be used in the tenant scope deployment, whenever you have the new SPPKG file deployed to the app catalog, it will be automatically updated. So you don't have to go to the site level and upgrade the web part, because the instance is always coming from the app catalog site collection. And that is a big difference, obviously, with SharePoint add-ins versus SharePoint Framework, but it gives you the centralized control on what are you actually running. So
yes, thanks, Vesa.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, so the dev release is running, so the build is done and the dev release is running, and it says in progress. So we'll just check the dev and we won't check the rest. But as you can see, it's spin up Ubuntu agent, release agent. It installed Node. Now it's running the bash script, and everything seems pretty good so far. So at the end, that will connect. It will add the new package there, and it's done. So everything seems good here. And if I go to my tenant and if I refresh here, you see that the time here should be different. It should be a few seconds ago. Let's see. There you go. And also the web part on the site that's been installed should change to version 13. There you go. So 20 minutes automated pipeline, and everything seems to be working just fine. I did integration with GitHub, but you can use Azure DevOps alone, where your Git repo is in Azure DevOps, if you will. A few more things to notice. This is not the absolute best practice. For me, it was just to set it up in 20 minutes and show you how it works, and we can talk in a separate session what is the best practice and what is quality gates and what is a pre-flight build and things like that. So this is not the true best practice, but as you can see, you can set up something automated in 20 minutes, which is great. And it's for free. You can start experimenting even now. I think that's it, Vesa.
There we go. Thank you, Velin. Extremely valuable, and it really shows the simplicity of the whole thing. It's actually surprisingly simplistic. Now, just out of curiosity, a few questions what people might be thinking. We'll go a few minutes long. Why CLI? Why not PowerShell? Do you know that if there's a performance impact on using Windows images there? Why did you come up with a Ubuntu and CLI usage? Why is that?
Yeah, so Valdex says that there is a performance gain when you use Mac. I assume when you use Windows, it might be a little bit faster than if you're using a standard VS 2017 agent, because there is a lot of going on in a VS 2017 agent. You have Windows, you have Visual Studio, MS Build, and all these things like using a simple Linux image might improve your timing slightly.
Yeah.
My idea was to show that if you're using the CLI tool, you can use everything. You can use containers, you can use Ubuntu, you can use whatever you decide. So that was the aim here, and it's very easy to use the CLI tool because for me, I as a Git user, I'm used to that syntax. I'm used to having Git in the command line and the CLI tool in the command line at the same time. It's almost the same syntax, and it's easier for me to execute commands like that because I don't have to open PowerShell, for example. So it's my choice basically. Advantage over PowerShell, I don't think. It's more like a choice tool for your choice.
Yeah, matter of a preference, so to say. But yeah, that's good input for the discussion. Just to clarify that as well, so you can absolutely build similar kind of things using PowerShell if that is the preference. But I think that was relatively simple. And Velin, we will definitely take you on the further discussion on the best practices and all of that stuff as part of this call, because I think that's super valuable as well. Because you as a team lead or in your company, you're doing this on a day-to-day basis. So it's a super valuable input for the others to learn as well.
Yes. Sure.
We are now 3 minutes over the hour. We do apologize. Once again, we're running out of the Q&A time, but we've been having a good Q&A discussion in the IM window on the future as well. If you're joining on this call, feel free to ask any questions on the IM window. It was good to see again that the discussion in the chat was super active. Now, we're looking into, just a reminder, we're looking into moving into the Microsoft Teams at some point. The transition will be completely seamless for you, except when you will click the link on the meeting, it will redirect you to the Microsoft Teams UIs, and most likely it will ask you to download something if you haven't actually installed Microsoft Teams. But we will do that when we're 100% sure that it's working properly without any issues. There has been some challenges related on that, and that's the reason why we're still using Skype for Business. In general, the next SharePoint Dev special interest group meeting is in January 10th, and that's when we talk about, again, the provisioning end-to-end scenarios, list and column formatting. Chris will again do a few tips and tricks in that one, and then a few other demos. If you're looking into, if you're interested on SharePoint framework and JavaScript client-side development, the next special interest group call on that one is 3rd of January, so a week from now on Thursday. But that's it for this one. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Velin, for your super valuable input. And we will close, and our dog on the background is clearly indicating that I need to go and check it out, what's happening on the living room. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, and we'll be absolutely in touch. Bye-bye.